some cool things now. You could drag and drop and exercises and things like that, but it's still never as good as the real thing, which is being on the line. And during a pandemic, you can't shoulder to shoulder train. So it's now you're trying to train from across the line with a piece of plastic in front of you with masks and nobody can hear you. And it's insane. So that's the dark side.
So it almost sounds like what we're saying here is that technology, you can leverage technology in order to optimize the human experience, but it's never going to replace what is beautifully happening with two people. Yeah.
It's 100% true.
And certainly the circumstances of COVID make that all the more challenging. Kelly, do you have anything to add here?
Man, you guys really just summed it up so well. I think that when it comes to, thinking about COVID, I think that I can think about more things that stayed the same than changed. And I think that might be a byproduct of the hospitality industry. We don't get to do a ton of virtual interviews and, work from home and things like that. So, I mean, on the one hand, yay, I personally don't have Zoom fatigue, hooray. But on the other hand, I think there is that, elevated level of risk or kind of navigating new anxieties. So I still see that balance of, technology and even if it's 6 feet apart, shoulder to shoulder, so to speak.
I will say, if I can add, Rachel, one thing though, the Teams and the Zoom, our skills now with it are so much better than they ever were before. So when you would have the occasional class that you would have to teach and people would be out of state because they couldn't make it in and you would have to include, there was always a train wreck before, right? It's like, oh, hold on, we'll try to get the technology. We could do that now. And we do classes, with 50 people sometimes, and we're able to do that because we've just gotten better with it. So I would say it actually kind of helped in that respect, and some cost savings with, if you've got a quick class that you don't want to fly everybody into, if you've got a bunch of outer marketplaces, technology's really helped, especially over COVID, has really helped us get to a better place with that.
John, that's such a great point. We say a rising tide raises all ships, right? And I think when we think about technology, a lot of times we think about, grandma can now place an online order with her phone, right? But I think the truth is our industry isn't, our frontline team is not necessarily as tech savvy as those 20%ers that are sitting at the desk all day, right? So there's definitely an adoption rate that has skyrocketed, I would agree.
So when we think about folks who are engaging with technology, it could be on a live Zoom call, it could be on a platform, it could be over, a scheduling app and people are just chatting. We've seen all of these different ways that folks interact. I want to dig into content here. I know that this is an important topic. I hear words a lot from training directors around consistency and updates and how you keep all of that content fresh. In what ways are we in the restaurant industry packaging content in the way that we always have? And in what ways are we changing the way we present content to employees? So the good old fashioned 80-page packet, right, is what I'm thinking about. How is that the same? Is it different? Are we thinking of creative ways to distribute that to the workforce? Or is that still the best way to get content to people?
I'll just jump in. I think that we have to address the creature of habit in all of us. And I think that sometimes we're naturally resistant to transformative change. And it's been a long year. I'm sure everyone on this fireside chat can agree, right? But I'm now finding myself even more excited and anxious to kind of agree package processes and try to make things more automated, remove paper packages that honestly I see start to get tattered and missing a page or something like that here. And it kind of begs the question, why do it in the first place? The one thing I don't really see employees lose is their phone. So why don't we present the content in a way where they'll always have access to it as long as they have their phone? Such
a great point. And I think to add to that, at Hopdoddy, we've taken a hybrid approach to training. I think I don't know, never say never, I guess, or never say always, but we'll probably always take some level of that. But I've seen us over the years go from that, that manual to like a couple of things on an LMS to really, we're probably 75-25. And I'll tell you, the past year, I mean, how many of you out there are still chasing down changes that you made 6 months ago and trying to capture it in a manual, right? And so I'll tell you that our manual is almost ready to go to print again and be updated, but all those online materials, the quizzes are updated, the flashcards are updated, the videos are updated. So I think there's definitely a distinct, advantage to that in the way that people are reached as well. And I think something else that shifted over the past year in particular is the frequency with which we communicate and the ability of our teams to catch that communication. So again, don't know about anybody else, but in the past we would have those kind of cadence communication. So the weekly or monthly newsletter, the quarterly call, and March 13th, 2020, boom, we started sending a daily video, just, hey, we're checking in, we're here. And it was a 1-minute video. And I think the stat still stands true that on average, people have about 4 minutes to dedicate to their own leadership and development. And so they're not saving up those minutes till the end of the week to go, oh, now I have an hour, right? And so kind of reaching people where they're at, we've kept up that spirit of, let's send a quick push notification. Let's, do that small bite-sized bit of information that's really helped to gain traction, both in, training, learning, and development.
John, I know you're going to chime in here. I want you to think of one thing while you're talking, and it was based on our conversation. User-generated content, things that employees are creating too. I want to hear from you on this side too.
Yeah. So one thing I was also going to say from our chat, Rachel, and I know you know this about me, is I'm a big believer in giving people learning in the way that they can best consume it. And so Frank talked about their phones. I mean, we got to get over this whole thing about not letting people have phones in a restaurant. Just stop. My kids do their homework on their phones. Like I come in, I say, I thought you're supposed to be doing homework. And they're like, I am. And they show me and they're doing their homework on their phone. We got to stop with this, the whole stigma of phones in a restaurant. Use it right, be responsible. But yeah, we got to start using phones. So that was one point Frank made. Kelly made a great point about attention spans. Make Twitter training, man. I don't know why, gone are the days where we make the training videos where today's Jim's first day. Jim's here and he's going to do some dishwashing. Let's all go and watch Jim. That's gone. So it's quick things. And because of COVID, we, like Kelly, we were changing our business model every day, right? We were changing. So we had to communicate different every day. The iPhone became our greatest friend. We were making training videos on an iPhone every day, it seemed like. And so you can make really great content. These phones are phenomenal. Make great content, but make it short, make it chunked, make it something that they can just watch in a few minutes, get a really great point out of and move on with their lives. I do love the idea of user-generated content when you get an LMS that can do that, or just text or ways where your users are like, hey man, I just saw this thing and I think you guys would like it, or put this article on. I see some restaurant companies doing that, and I love the fact that they're doing that, and I'll try to get mine there as soon as possible. We're not quite there yet, but I think also, I do think there's a blended approach. I do think there's still some people who like to write. There's still some people who just like to write, and that's how they learn best. So again, give them the way that they use that stuff in content, but printing's much cheaper than it's ever been. So you can reprint books quarterly, and then you don't have the pages that are missing. Stop doing the fancy binding and just put it in a binder and move on with your lives. And then it's updated. So I think a lot of the time we used to be like, package it in this beautiful, friendly thing with the great 40-minute video. And we're just give them something quick, give them something that they can use, make it electronic, make it written so everybody's covered, you move on.
We have this dream at Opus about this world in which there is your content's great. There's nothing wrong with your content, but a lot of the time we hear about there's a distribution problem. It's how do you get, and John, you were just alluding to this, the right content to the right people at the right time. And what that might mean is that Frank prefers to see a piece of paper or a PDF in front of him. Kelly prefers a video, and John prefers a tweet-sized interaction. And that's that definition of one size fits one that I'm hearing from all of you, which is how can we create this world in which we're not setting the rules for how you need to train. Kelly, I know that this is something important to you. We're saying, here's all the ways in which you can train. You know, you can kind of decide what works best for you. Of course, we're not there yet in the training world. There's a lot of work to do, but with that said, I want to go into a final stat, and then I want to talk about metrics here. Emergence Capital reports that 60% of frontline workers are unsatisfied with or believe that there's room for improvement in the tech that they are provided at work. Or the tech that they are using at work. So what do you think is missing from that employee experience when it comes to technology?
I mean, I kind of just talked about it a little bit. Let them use their phones. Let them use their phones. Let them just don't set them down in front of a computer. They're not used to that. They don't like that. Let them use their phone. They can use it right on the system. Most of us have KVSs. You can literally put training videos and build charts right there. They could reach up, they could tap the screen. They get information now in bits and bytes so fast. Make TikTok videos. I don't care what's going to speak to them. Like let's make it something that they can use. And I do think the phone is a big deal.
I love this KDS idea. If anyone out there doesn't know what a KDS is, it's a kitchen display system. Yeah, I was going to say delivery. The TV screen that's up top that puts in the order that tells you what the orders are. Love it. Brilliant.
Yeah, at our openings, we used to, lug out the projector and the screen, and you'd go to Staples and you'd buy one because it'd be cheaper than shipping, and then we realized, oh my goodness, we can put this on a USB and plug it into one of our TVs. Carry on. So you're absolutely right. I think too, it's not just any computer, John, that you're talking about that we'd have to prop our team up in front of in order for it to be resilient enough to withstand the day-to-day in a restaurant. I mean, it's pretty much, what the Army is, like the tech the Army's hauling off to war, I mean, it's like that clunky, big, resilient computer that's so slow. And so our team they just don't speak that language. Heck, I don't speak that, that language either. So I think the other thing too is just support. I can't help but think about the old Steve Jobs, it just works campaign, right? I think about that every time I have to restart my phone. And so I just don't think we have the level of support, because we're all, if you're like, okay, we can do the fancy iPad, but we're going to have to upgrade it every 2 years, or here's this, no offense to the Android lovers out there, but that's what we're using, right? It's a little bit more sturdy. It's the $50 tablet, but does it have all the bells and whistles? Is it or are you constantly having to go, oh, let's, troubleshoot that or things like that? And so I think that, quite frankly, it's just the level of support that we provide around technology. We don't have the Apple Care, call in and get the customer support for our teams. And so when something doesn't work, our natural inclination is to just maneuver our way around it, as opposed to try and figure it out, because we don't have time.
Is Wi-Fi
doesn't stop working.
Isn't Wi-Fi connection like also the biggest thing in restaurants? Like, am I the only one that has this constantly? Well, our Wi-Fi's down. Oh, well, that's helpful to get to your training materials. I'm really excited about that.
Or even complete your line check, or
yeah, just anything. It's temps. You got temp check. You have a tablet now. I mean, you can't do it without Wi-Fi, and it's always the issue.
So we I want to talk a little bit about something somebody just chatted me on LinkedIn. A question, and we're talking a lot about tech now. I want to talk about the actual learning modalities for a minute, and then we're going to go into metrics. So learning modalities is a really nerdy term for how people learn. It can be used in a number of different ways, but one of the ways that this person was referring to it is what's the best way for someone to learn at work in a restaurant? What are your opinions? We've talked about these manuals, right? But this person says, well, from my experience, people aren't sitting down and reading manuals. So is audio visual best? Is reading and writing best? Is dialogue best? What is ideal for the deskless worker, someone who's standing on their feet all day? What kind of modalities have you witnessed that work best in your operations or just in your experience?
Well, I'll tell you, if you're having trouble with manuals, one awesome thing that I picked up recently is I know someone who put out a blanket statement that if you find a typo in the manual, we'll give you $10. And what does that do, right? That just has everybody start scanning through the manual. I thought that was brilliant. For me, this is a little bit of a one size fits all approach. I think you almost start there and then you go granular. But for me, I think it's on the job observation. Studies have shown that if you watch somebody do something successfully, ring in an order, make a burger, and you can visualize that yourself, you can almost hit the ground running to be able to do that with a little bit of coaching. And so I do think that technology and LMS can stand in for that, through those videos or even different scenarios or visualizations. But I think that's where we start. Whatever the right avenue is, what you're trying to do is simulate what is done so people can visualize that.
Hey, Kelly, I love that. I was actually just having a conversation with one of our general managers, and she was having a conversation with an employee, talking just like a performance development conversation. And the employee said, this other employee does such a great job, in the front of house with guests. I think they do a better job than me. And she kind of explored that and said, like, well, what do you think he does better than you? And it was just this very kind of like seamless conversation where you could leverage your high performing employees to be an example within the restaurant that others want to emulate. And I think it was such a powerful moment that really kind of like had to be there to witness. But I think that kind of behavior is contagious in like a good way. You want employees to kind of like level up each other because, this person on the right side of me or the left side is doing such a good job. And I just love that conversation and that interaction.
Yeah, so I have strong opinions on the whole modalities piece, which is probably, I realize a shock to everybody that I have strong opinions about something, but a lot of people are like, well, I'm a visual learner, I'm a kinesthetic learner, I want to hear things. And here's my point, and I thought Kelly said it best: start broad and then go granular, right? So nobody ever didn't learn from watching it, hearing it, seeing it, and doing it. There's nobody that goes, well, I'm a visual learner, so now I can't do it because you made me hear it and watch it and do it. You know what I'm saying? So just do it all of that. Like just tie all that in there. It's a blended approach. So give them something they can watch, give them something they can do, give them something they can hear. Reading, if they're a good reader, fine, go read it, right? Give it the way, again, the best way that they can consume it. But I think, for restaurants, you have to have a blended approach though. You cannot just rely on, just go watch Jimmy do this and he'll, and you'll learn it, because Jimmy might not do it right? So watch the perfect way to do it on video, get a little practice on there, get you some knowledge, then we go onto the line and then we watch, then we go, okay, well, I got this. You've got a trainer who's giving them that. And then you give them maybe a little something. It's not a big manual, but maybe it's a sheet that they got to write a few things down in so that they get, again, practicing some and getting some of those synapses working in their brain. That's a little bit different than watching will fire. And then now you've got a really nice combination. So we've watched it, we've written about it, we've read about it, we've now seen the guy do it right, and now we get to practice. And so it's the do, right? Now we get the do is the most important part, because now they got to practice it and do it over, and that's how they're going to learn. So I guess my answer is all of them when you ask me which modality is the most important.
So D, all of the above.
Yes, yes.
You
I'm
just
basically Switzerland. Yes.
I love that. I just wanted to chime in as well, because I think that it shouldn't go unsaid that of all of these things, the most important is motivation. Because if somebody isn't motivated to do it, then it doesn't matter what way we try to throw something at them. And so we are starting to think about customization a little bit differently. And I'll give you an example, and it's not fully formed yet, full transparency. We're just starting on this journey, but we are creating basically a Hopdoddy university for our management team. And it's specifically geared towards, some of those soft skills. And what my vision is each module, whether it's change management or coaching or praising and motivating or things like that, we want the individual to be motivated to attend the course. So it's actually going to start with kind of a self-assessment quiz. Think, BuzzFeed or something like that, where they answer a couple of questions and it will shoot back out at them. Man, you're a pro at this, that, you may want to consider working on these things, and that might motivate them to choose their own adventure through the course. Why does everybody have to start with time management and then move on to, communicating through numbers and then move on to the next thing? It really, from that perspective, it shouldn't be one size fits all. Although the skills are the same, you're really motivating people to choose their own adventure and navigate through. Similarly, we all have to pick up the same tactical skills to be a proficient team member, but is there a way to, because once we're good, we start to get good at something, that is motivation that kind of has that snowball effect that carries on to the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, the thing that maybe you dreaded, you're excited to do because of how you've mastered the other steps before it.
So this is interesting. And, the whole title of this Fireside chat is Innovations in Restaurant Training. And this is something that we were not talking about 5 years ago, which is the self-guided training. You all have been talking about tacit or tribal knowledge, which we know has benefits and downsides, right? What if that tacit knowledge is not the right tacit knowledge and people are transferring the wrong knowledge to one another? But it's really interesting to hear y'all talk about how there's a lot of trust that we're imparting on folks to kind of decide where they have knowledge gaps. But it also feels like there's some tools or some metrics that you're using in order to identify where those gaps are, in order to build additional training. So I think the transition here is about the most nebulous term on the planet, but arguably one of the most important words that we ever use in learning and development. We're going to start with the basics. What does engagement actually mean? I'm going to ask all of you to answer this question. Take a stab at defining employee engagement for me, and then we're going to dig into metrics here. Frank,
I'll
it's
jump
like
in.
you.
Let's do it. I think there's so many ways to look at this, but for me, I think engagement is all about the relationship between the organization and the employee. It really is a mix of like active listening, feedback, passion. Kelly mentioned like commitment and motivation that drives that employee and company performance. We often talk about employee engagement, but what about like company engagement? I think that when we talk about it and look at it like a two-way street, that's really where you kind of have that synergy moment and you kind of do have, each other's attention respectively.
Yeah, simply put, I mean, I agree. It's a relationship, right? I mean, it's called engagement for a reason, right? We are creating and cultivating that relationship and everything that goes along with it, which means great communication. That has to work both ways. So often it's, one way, right? I think feedback is definitely a critical component to that as well. And most importantly, growing together, right? It's not, and that's kind of the purpose of feedback, not only to the team member, but also back to the business, right? It's that I just think of, the best relationships, whether, friendships or marriage or anything, that you grow together. And that component is really important when it comes to engagement for me.
Yeah, so I actually tried to define this, Rachel, when I read your question, and I actually came up with my own definition. It's probably terrible, but I'm going to just try it. It's the interaction your team has with managers or other team members other than within the performance of their daily duties. And so here's what I mean by that. Like they go to work and anybody can go clock in and they can go do those things. When you're engaged, you're getting a manager come in and talk to you about something different, or when you come in the morning or in the afternoon and your manager says, hey, what's going on? They do like a check-in. They do a checkout with you afterwards. You talk to team members about something else that's going on. Hey, did you hear so-and-so got promoted? How great is that? It's the things beyond just the hi, it's $20.35, or it's beyond those interactions that's engaged. And the more touch points you have outside of your own daily routine, the more engaged you're going to be, because you've got more touch points, you've got more things going on with the restaurant that's outside of just me taking an order and making a sandwich.
I love that. And what just resonated with me was, I don't know if anyone else has this. I think a lot of humans do in general. Those moments when you're super overwhelmed or you can't focus, what have you. What I do is I go for a walk. I know Kelly's like, I'm in it. I'll go for a walk, or I'll read a book that has nothing to do with what I'm working on. I have like a whole bunch of business books here. I also have a whole bunch of sci-fi books that I like to open up and read. And it actually clears my mind and it gets me back and engaged with the work that I was doing. So John, I love what you're saying about this, because it's almost like you're giving folks permission to engage outside of what's expected of them, with one another, with guests, with materials, with the outer world, in order to really bring home like a higher order of engagement. It sounds like what you're describing.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. Yes.
Oh, I love it. Well, so let's be a little bit, we're going to go, we know what the metrics are, the good metrics for engagement are, right? Completion, accuracy, all those things that we would expect, right? Yeah, we're all kind of rolling our eyes a little bit. We have a lot of training directors who are watching right now. What metrics for success are restaurant leaders not thinking about, but should? And when we talk about metrics, I'm going to challenge y'all to think about the data points that we can take back to the rest of the company and say, this is working or this is not working. How are you thinking about success metrics with training?
Nobody wants to answer this one, I feel like. Yeah, exactly. This is a tough question, because I don't know that leaders aren't thinking of these things. I don't know if they're thinking of them in relation to learning and development. So for instance, speed of service to me is always going to be a training thing. It's a metric I look at constantly. How fast people get up to speed, how fast they are actually performing in their job, how fast from the time they finish training until I don't have to schedule 2 people for that one person's role. So I'm a big speed person, right? So how fast can they get up to? Per person expenditure, PPE, is giant. If you got a person who is increasing sales, that means they understand the menu, they can talk through the menu, and they can work through that menu. That means they're trained right. If you've got a real small PPE, that means you're probably not training your cashiers or your order takers in the right way. So you've got to look at that. And also PPE, per person expenditure per team member. So how much are you spending on the team member to get as much ROI out of them as you can? And so those are things, I think people look at them. I just don't know that they think of them in relation to training. And hopefully somebody has a way better answer than what I just said.
I hear the term sales per man hour a lot these days too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little tired of it. John, I think to your point, you're right. It is a tough question, right? Because I do think gone are the days where training is just that investment, right? We have had a tough year and we have had to prove ourselves and our worth because we're the first thing that hits the cutting floor. And so I think that we've really emerged stronger in that perspective. So I do think that we look at metrics for training. I think maybe what might be missing is metrics for learning and development. I think we talk about like, oh, what happens after the initial training? Okay, that's good stuff, but it's icing on the cake. Yes, you should learn those skill sets and career developments. And so this is more of a big picture metric for our business, but we look at how many people are promoted. And last year we just reached a huge hurdle, which is we had our first team member to general manager promotion, and they went through all of the steps, right? But they were somebody who did it. And that means that everybody can look at that person and say, that's possible. I can do that at Hopdoddy. And so that's a metric that we measure, but the way that we get there, and this isn't a measure, maybe a little bit, is a metric you can measure depending on the size of your business, is that level of feedback. Because that team member, 5 years ago when they started, 5 days into their training, they were sat down by their general manager and they were asked, what's next for you? And so by posing that 5 days in, and we document it, and actually we in the training and people department, we read those answers for all of our new hires. Not that I'm, necessarily jumping on the phone to have an impact, but I want to know globally, what do our people want? Because then you can take that broad approach to training. And some people's answers are, hey, I need to learn the bar a little bit better. I don't really know all of my drinks. But some people are saying, I want to be a trainer. I want to be a manager. I joined this company. How do I get there? And so they're starting that conversation. So I hopefully answered the question to kind of start from a not easily measured metric to an easily measured metric, which is how many people are promoted. And, in my 7 years, I just counted, I've been a part of over 100 promotions within this company. And I think that's just, I wear that with a badge of honor, knowing that it was definitely took a village to get there. And there are a lot of people to credit for that, but it's a really cool stat.
Yeah, that's an amazing stat. And I love, so you just made my brain burst, Kelly, with ideas, this notion of feedback as a metric. If we're building trust with employees from day one, what is the metric for employees feeling comfortable sharing more about their experience as employees, so that we can improve the training process or the L&D process, or the, how to get faster on the register, whatever it may be, but how can you actually exchange those ideas?
One quick thing we're doing is, and I'm sorry, Frank, I know you're ready, but when people clock in, we're doing these like 1 or 2 question surveys lately, and it's how likely are you to recommend this place to work for a family member or a friend? And I think you get a lot of information out of that, right? So we gauge, and we're improving every quarter when we get this question. And so that's how we know we're making a bit of an impact, is through little tiny questions like that, little things where we can ask that.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate, Rachel, it reminded me of a conversation I believe I had with your team a few weeks ago talking about feedback. And I said, there's some current training that there's not enough feedback elements incorporated into it. And I'm struggling to capture whether or not this is effective enough. And we were talking shifting into Opus, and why there is that component. I think it's so important. The EMPS score, we want to know in real time, from our employees. They're the best people that are going to give us the information we need to continue to tailor those trainings too. But if we're not collecting that information, once again, we're just creating things in this ether and we're not really sure where it's going and how effective it is. So I think that Kelly, you mentioned feedback, and I just my mind was blown because I didn't originally think of that, but it's so, so important.
I had a conversation just this morning with someone in the beverage industry, beverage distribution. And she goes, our CEO's happy place is not when he's in the restaurants, not when he's speaking at major public events, is when he's in the warehouse and he's just talking to employees, because he's getting the best feedback he can about the operation, what's actually happening on the ground. So I think we're going to have a lot of folks who are interested in a follow-up here on your feedback insight, Kelly.
Well, can I just chime in? Because John and Frank both said it, but if you aren't somehow measuring your ENPS, I think that is a metric that we should not, pass by, whether it's on a day-to-day basis or, your quarterly or even your annual engagement survey. I think that is a good benchmark.
Right. And that's just, and for anyone watching, what an NPS is not about your personal satisfaction. It actually goes deeper. It says, well, how likely are you to recommend us as an employer or this product or this training or what have you to someone else, which is actually the measure of success, beyond just how you're personally feeling. Would you feel so excited about it that you'd want to tell a buddy? So let's dig in a little bit deeper. We've got about 15 minutes here. So I want to talk about resources. Everyone wants to know what y'all are reading, what you're listening to, where you're going. We are in a very a busy training world right now. And I know that a lot of new interesting things have come to the surface. So where are you hanging out? Where are your networks? Where are you excited to be as training directors in the restaurant world these days?
I want to take this first because I'm going to give a little plug to my peeps at CHART, Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers. It is just a fantastic place. If you are in the restaurant world, if you're in the beverage world, if you're in the hotel world, this is a place where executives, managers, instructional designers, people who just love training and do that for a living in some form or fashion, we get together at conferences, we get together at virtual conferences. There's all kinds of things going on, and it is a fantastic resource to go and just get what you need from those people. And I know there's several of us on here who have been attached to CHART for a very long time, and I have, and I'm lucky enough to be a lifetime member. I've been around. I'm also really old, but that just means I've had more time to be in charge. So I really love it, and I would say that's a place that if you are a new person in training and you want to figure out where can I get resources, where can I get the best knowledge, where can I ask somebody who's been doing this for a while, it would be that place. So,
and a past president too, right, John?
I am, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still my answer. I mean, I'm sure that there are other places and we can chat about them, but if you are not, if you are in training and you have not gotten involved with CHART, what are you waiting for? Just a quick fun story there. So John and I have a mutual past colleague of mine, current colleague of his, Jody, and I got the opportunity to work for Jody for I think all of 4 months, but she was coming in as I was leaving a past life, and I just remember the last time I got to visit the home office and see her. She just gave me this list of, okay, here's what you got to do. You get buy these books, because I was going off to be a director of training at Hopdoddy 7 years ago, and the last thing she said was, and join CHART. So if you all need that message out there, join CHART.
That's great. I need to join CHART, I guess. I'm not currently in, but I will join after this fireside chat for sure. Just to throw something else out there that I kind of fell into the early part of the pandemic was these 2 Slack channels. One is called Resources for Humans, and the other is People Operations United. It's such a great place, and it covers not just L&D, but just all of the different facets of human resources. I was so impressed with how willing people are to jump on a phone call with you to kind of navigate through that, mostly about the coronavirus and the pandemic, but just about so many different things. And people are willing to schedule Zoom calls and chat and share resources. And it just became this community for me as I was kind of navigating this. And our team right now at Fuku is pretty small. So it was great to have this extension of my department through all these insightful people that worked really all over the world. It was so beautiful.
These so second, third, fourth, your CHART recommendation, Frank, something you're bringing up about Slack is really interesting. Is I'm seeing a migration now of professionals in the restaurant industry moving into Slack and Teams and these kind of chat groups. We used to have one on WhatsApp with people. But is that the direction we're headed? Is it because of the pandemic? I would assume that a lot of folks just want to stay connected on these threads and chatting. And so I guess the question is this the end of the conference? Are we going back to conferences?
I think we'll go back to conferences, but I do think these will be supplemental. I think the fact that you can get on like this, I mean, we put this together last week, and you were like, "Hey, what a great idea! And we all went, "Sure," and we all got together, and we were having this great conversation that I actually don't want to end. But I do think at some point, human contact is still human contact, right? And we're never going to actually replace that. And man, chart. And I will say that my first conference, it was a lot of huggers, and I wasn't necessarily a hugger at that time. I've become one just because you had to. But it's just people being around each other with this love and passion for the same thing, and you're not going to replace that on a Slack channel or anything like that. However, I do love Slack. I do love these channels where I can go for a few minutes, get an escape, and get some contact, because I still can't get as much human contact as I want to in real life. So.
Well, and definite shout out to LinkedIn too, because, Rachel, you and I didn't even know each other, like a random message about a month ago. And, I've actually had several people reach out and go, "How do you know Rachel? How do you know Rachel?" When they saw our names connected here. So, I think there's definite power in just, kind of muddling through some of the, the cold calls and things like that, but just genuinely making that connection. And, it felt very much like, in middle school, where you're like, "Hi, I'm Kelly. Do you want to be my friend?" Right? So there was that.
That's exactly all my co-founders listening right now. And like, that's exactly how I approach people, because I love people and I want more friends. And so being able to just be like, hey, Frank, do you just want to grab a beer? I really would love to just talk because we're maybe it's just the product of the last year, but we're all kind of missing these moments where we're just learning from one another. I miss running into people in the street. And so I love that we're having these moments now of just sharing and learning and in such creative ways. So in order to let's take this moment that we're thinking about as connected humans on these different pathways, dig in deep with me here. Let's be real about the world that's ahead of us right now. We're still facing a lot of challenges. There are hiring challenges right now. We're thinking about how to attract staff back to the restaurant industry. I know that training is a huge component of that. There was another crazy statistic. I'm going to get this wrong, but there was a very high percentage. I will follow up on LinkedIn on what the percentage is of folks who are, when they're seeking a new employer, frontline employees, they're scrutinizing what kind of training they're going to get. They're thinking about that and really paying attention to what those learning, development opportunities are. So my question for you is, and I say that because it's a noticeable change, I think, that I'm noticing is, what predictions do you have for the coming year when it comes to technology and employee training? And then we're gonna go way far into the future after that. But just 2021, April 8th, 2021 to April 8th, 2022, what do you think is gonna happen?
I think there's going to continue to be a demand for tech. I think about it like this. If I hired you for a sales job and I told you I'm going to measure your performance by, you making 1,000 calls a week, and then I hand you a rotary phone, you'll probably just hand me your notice, right? Like, that's just the truth. So we need to equip our frontline teams with accessible ways that feel relevant to them. And I think that they're using their phones. And like, I'm on it with John to start a campaign to like bring the phone into the workplace, embrace the phone. Like, I love that. And I think that's what we need to see. Employees are going to start experiencing this from organizations. And when they leave, they're going to expect the same things. And if we don't meet those expectations, they will probably leave. We won't be able to retain them. So I think it's very important to keep that in the back of our heads this year.
Such a great point. And I think that I always joke with my team that training is always either one step ahead or one step behind, right? We're either like, wait, that's going to print next week, or, oh, well, it's happening next week, but we went ahead and, launched it so that you can be prepared. And I think that the reality we have to face with technology in particular is that our business, the hospitality industry, is going to continue to evolve greatly. And we are not going back. We are not going to go to a time that is pre-pandemic. We all have, curbside phone technologies and scan the QR code to place your order. And I think that our job in training is to stay alongside that as much as we can, and see around corners as much as we can, as well. So we may not necessarily be innovating or inventing or debuting the technologies, but what we have to do is keep up with as our business innovates. And I think, to your point, those individuals looking at the application or thinking about joining your team, they want to think about, not just the training experience, but what is the guest experience like? Because you can see that more readily than the behind the curtains training experience. And so those two do have to parallel each other.
And she kind of stole mine, so now I got to kind of come up with a different one. So it's excellent answer, Kelly. And Frank, of course, I'm on you with the phone, hug a phone today. I would say, I think the team members that we get, because they're so hard to get, we're getting good ones, right? So we got to sift through a lot of stuff, and we got to really attract people. But the ones we get kind of want to know where they're going to go beyond just this first job already. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I have teenagers come in and like, so when can I be a manager? They're already looking that direction. And so if you don't have your career path written out, if you don't have a direction for them to go, just like Frank and Kelly both said, they're looking at your training to get in. That's first day, right? Here's first day. By the way, here's our career path. Here's what you can get. You can get as much out of it as you want, but here's where you can go. I think if you don't have that over this next year, I think you're going to lose out on even more team members. And we all know we're all struggling to get team members as much as possible. And so is technology huge? Yeah, it is. Is it going to get any more affordable in this next year? Probably not. Maybe a little bit. I do think this is the year we start to catch up with some of the non-restaurant companies. I do think most restaurant companies are at least embracing e-learning now. They're at least saying, okay, let's at least get some tablets in and let people start to use things. Some of us are still, we're pounding the drum for the phone, and I think more and more will do that. And so I think people are just starting to go, all right, what do we got to do to get these people in? Because we need people bad. And so how can we just do things differently? And so, somebody asked me if, this is years ago, they said, do you want us to think outside the box? And I said, no, I want you to crush the box. I don't want to know that a box ever existed. Let's just do things just completely different. And I think now it's more important than ever to actually do that. I think we just got to be different if we're going to attract some really great people.
So do we feel like this is the same? I'm hearing career paths. We're talking about this a lot right now at Opus. How can we support employers in building skill paths that don't match the hierarchy? Because there are so many different ways that people can grow in the workplace. They can grow vertically, they can grow horizontally. And it seems to be something I'm hearing a lot of right now. Do you feel like this is temporary? Is this something that we're going to continue to see? Is 2030, training 2030 in restaurants? We're all going to be there. We've all worked in the industry forever. What does it look like a decade from now?
Oh, I love this question, but Kelly came off of mute, so I want her to go first.
I'll Rochambeau you for it. Well, I'll set you up, John, to take it for me, because in order to answer this question, I think the first thing we have to do is gain the perspective. And so I took a look 10 years back, because it's so hard to think about 10 years in the future, right? I just can't imagine it. Like we think, oh, George Orwell, 1984, and you're like, oh, that happened. Like, and it was so long ago. Anyway, so 10 years ago, the iPhone 4 had just debuted. Think about that. 10 years ago, I put my first QR code in training materials, and a year later, it had 0 scans. Maybe it was little too soon. It really took the pandemic to get traction on QR codes, and now they're everywhere. You just can't, and I think definitely technology has evolved, right? Because all you have to do is open your phone. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but back then you had to download a special app, and downloading an app took, a secure Wi-Fi connection, and that took, pretty much like standing right up next to the hub. So long story short, I think we've just come so far. I think if you asked us 10 years ago, we wouldn't have dreamt of being where we are here. But one thing I can tell you is that no matter where we evolve with technology, it will never replace human touch. And I have a training philosophy that is guest first, technology last. And that means, from as simple as if you're behind an Aloha POS, if somebody's walking up to you, you look up and you make eye contact with them first. It doesn't matter if they're walking down, throwing Diet Coke and a cheeseburger, at you, you guest first, technology last. And I think that applies to training, and that it has to be, human first, technology last. The technology should be there to boost and support. So wherever it evolves, I think it has to be a supportive of hospitality, which is what we all do.
All right, so I liked those answers. I love human and guest first, technology last. But I do think in 10 years, I do think we'll be training differently. I think we'll be training with a lot more AI. I think we'll be training with a lot more headsets and things like that, where we can replicate, right? We can replicate that human interaction with that guest coming in and talking to you and practicing the response and getting no, that's not it. Maybe try this, and the decision trees and all that stuff that can pop up, so that you're not actually practicing on guests. I say this all the time, like you're putting somebody on the line so that you can train them, but they don't know what they're doing yet. So you're going to have the guests get the food or the service from that person that doesn't know what they're doing. That's good for the brand. That feels right. You know what I'm saying? So when we can get technology that's affordable, I'm talking to you technology companies, AI is too expensive right now. The goggles break, they're too expensive, and we want stuff that we can afford. But when that happens, I think it will change the face of the way we train. You can set up a line. It's realistic. Their arms got to go do it. They got to build the sandwich. They got to have that muscle memory. They'll keep practicing and they'll keep practicing. And then you go on the line, and then it's all of a sudden now all that comes back to you because, oh, that's right, I just built this and I go that. Now, there's always going to need the human touch of it, and I never want to get away from that. But I do think technology is going to evolve so much that it's going to make our lives so much easier to train. That's all I'm going to say. And robots will probably rule the world.
Yeah, I agree.
There we are, John.
You're the one that brought up replicants. Okay.
I mean, it is true. Yeah.
I love it though. Like in my notes, I had VR and training simulations. So I think back when I was a kid, a little boy, and my dad would always tell me about like self-driving cars would one day be on the street, and me and my brother just were like so fascinated. And now I look at Tesla. I hope he was investing in the stocks way back when, but I think that like that's the stuff, and I think Kelly mentioned it earlier about choose your own adventure story and thinking about how you could set up this with AI and VR, and I think that'd be so exciting. And probably 10 years it would just be like the norm. But for me, that little kid, I just think about it, like how cool and exciting would that be to have that technology and training now.
I love this. I love that. I love all the hope. And also, I think when I think about the future, it's all about immersive training. And Kelly, to your point, it includes that human touch. It also includes how can we engage with the things, the people, the environment around us, and actually leverage those things. We're getting smarter, and which is like scary and amazing and all at the same time. But how can we kind of keep up with a faster and faster paced world is going to be a big question.
Well, John, I love your AI idea, because I can't help but think at new restaurant openings, how much repetition, how much waste. We desperately look for, can we take these burgers that we have to practice on to our neighbors and to, anywhere that the local fire station, police station. And, but if you're able to just kind of put on the goggles and go, okay, here's my, practice, and then you've got it. You're minimizing waste. There's going to be some residual benefits that are just so cool.
The three of you, love y'all. Thank you so much for joining. This was the fastest hour and 15 and the most enjoyable. Frank's putting a heart up on the screen. Can we do that now? Oh, I'm so in. Thank you so much for joining us. Couldn't have had a better conversation. Kelly McCutcheon from Hopdoddy Burger Bar, Frank Palmieri from David Chang's Fuku, and John Isbell from Portillo's. I'm Rachel Nemeth from Opus. If you want to catch our next Fireside Chat, follow us on LinkedIn. For those of you who stuck around on LinkedIn, sorry we had a couple of technical difficulties at the start. We are recording this, so we're going to record the full version and post it up on LinkedIn. Thank you all so much for joining. This was wonderful. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.